Claude Skills are quickly becoming one of the most popular features in AI. And even if you don't use Claude, if you use ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or any other AI, this still applies. Because this idea of AI skills might have begun as a feature in Anthropic Claude, but it is rapidly being adopted as a standard approach that we can use anywhere. A skill is a way to have a reusable set of instructions that tells AI how to do a specific task your way. So it's not just answer this specific question or rephrase that email. No, a skill might be something more like telling AI, okay, here's exactly how our team writes proposals. Here are the fonts we use. Here's the structure we like. Here's the tone we want to use. Here's the things we always include in proposals. Here's what we don't include. It's a way to define what you want and then very easily package it up and give it a name so you can use that skill again and again and again. And if you use Claude, you've probably already been using skills without knowing it. Because if you've ever asked Claude to make you a PowerPoint deck, or a Word document, or a spreadsheet, or a PDF, Claude didn't just automatically know how to do that. It loaded a skill. It's a set of instructions, and also potentially scripts and reference files, but it's a package that tells Claude how to work with that particular file format. And it only loads that skill when it needs it. Claude isn't thinking about PowerPoint formatting all of the time. It's only when you ask it something like, create a slide deck, that it will go and pull in those instructions on demand. Now, that's an example of a more technically complex skill that includes actual code and file manipulation and formatting details, but not all skills are like that. Some are much simpler. If you think about, say, brand guidelines, your organization's brand guidelines is often just a document like a PDF in plain language. It describes the fonts you use and your color palette and your tone of voice and how you want things aligned. And this is the kind of thing you can just describe to an AI in plain language. So you could create a skill for your organization or even your team's brand guidelines, basically telling the AI, whenever I ask you to create some kind of visual asset, follow these rules. So a skill can be technically sophisticated and include code, or it can be just a set of clearly written instructions. The format is flexible enough to allow both. Now, Claude does come with a few skills already built in. Skills for working with PowerPoint and spreadsheets and PDFs and Word documents. Those skills are bundled with Claude because they're just generally useful. I mean, we could imagine people in any kind of role finding a use for that. But you can then also use Claude's Customize option to browse for additional skills. And Anthropic makes several others available. For example, there's a skill for creating animated GIFs for Slack. There's another skill for guiding you through co-authoring documentation. And there's even a skill called Skill Creator that can help you make new skills. Because skills can be custom, they can be personal, they can be skills that just capture how you do your work. Now, the first group to really make use of skills was developers using Claude Code. And if you were to look at a typical developer's collection of AI skills, you'd see it isn't just one massive write code skill. It's lots of smaller, specific ones. You might have one skill for user interface design, another skill for how coding standards work on that project or at that organization. You could have a different skill for how code review is done, another skill for generating test files, each one narrow and focused. And the same idea applies to any kind of work. You wouldn't just have one massive skill called marketing. You might have one skill for writing social media posts, and maybe a different skill for how you draft answers to customer comments, or one skill for campaign briefs and a different one for competitive analysis. And just a quick sidebar, skills are typically named in lowercase, and if you have multiple words, they are separated with hyphens, sometimes called Kebab Case. So, here's an example of a custom skill. Let's say every Friday you need to write a status update for your stakeholders and you need to send an email. So you have a specific format that you follow, what you ship this week, what's blocked, what's coming next. And you have a specific tone of voice. It's concise and direct, no fluff. Now, you could certainly write this as a long and complex prompt. Tell AI the format, the tone, who the audience is. Perhaps even provide a few examples of what the weekly update has looked like in previous weeks. Now, in the past, you could even just save this prompt to your desktop, and then every week you'd go and find that file, copy and paste it, and reuse it. And if you ever find yourself doing something like that, where you're repeating a very similar process again and again in AI, that is a great indicator that you have a good candidate for a skill. And if I'm in an existing chat and I realize I want to do this again next week, and the week after, and the week after, I could then go and ask Claude, okay, help me turn this into a skill. And because I have that skill creator installed, Claude is going to step me through a process of doing that. Now, sure, I could begin from scratch with a brand new chat or even manually, but if I already have a worthwhile conversation with a lot of existing context, I want to capture that workflow. Then I would just use that as a starting point. And when I ask Claude to help me turn this into a skill, it's going to ask me a few questions. It's going to try and clarify the intent of the skill. It might ask me about the expected output. It might ask me to clarify exactly when should this skill be triggered. What kind of phrases might I use so it would know to go and look that skill up? And then Claude builds that skill for me. I can review it, see what it does, agree, disagree, ask for changes, or even just go ahead and install it so it's available from then on. And if I want to make changes later down the road, I can do that and just ask it to help me change and update that skill. Now, there are some technical details. Every skill gets its own folder, and it's named in that Kebab Case format. Inside that folder, there has to be a file called skill.md. This is just a text file written in Markdown, and that's the only file that's required. Everything else is optional. And for simple skills, that might be all you have, just that single skill.md file with the instructions. But the skill folder can also contain additional files like additional documentation or examples or code. But here's the good news. The skill creator skill just helped me do that. I didn't have to create that folder manually. I just described what I wanted. And once that skill exists, now every time I ask Claude to help me make the status update, it already knows my format, my tone, my structure. I don't have to explain it again and again. Now, I can either explicitly call that skill by name. If I type a /, I'll see a list of the skills I currently have access to in Claude, and I can choose that one. But I don't have to use the actual name of the skill in the / because the skill itself has a description that tells the AI when it should be triggered. So even if I forgot exactly what the name of the skill was, if I use a phrase like create my status update or make the weekly update, it should just go ahead and load that skill and do it. And okay, this exact example might not be something you need to do, but think about what else you repeat. Anything that you find yourself explaining to AI more than once that is a skill waiting to be written. So, in late 2025, Anthropic, who make Claude, published this skill idea as an open standard. Anyone can use it. Any AI tool can support it, and that's been exactly what's happened. OpenAI adopted it. GitHub Copilot supports it. Cursor supports it. Manus supports it. OpenClaw uses it. The day I recorded this video, Google started rolling out skills in Gemini, and it means any skill you write today isn't locked to Claude. You can take that same skill, that same folder, and that same file and use it in a completely different AI tool. Skills are portable. And that's the bigger story here. We're starting to see a way to teach AI tools new abilities in a way that isn't controlled by just one company. It's a way you can take that skill with you. Now, two things to be aware of. First, there are already thousands of skills being shared online. They're on websites and on GitHub repositories and community collections. And some of them are fantastic, but recognize that a skill is a set of instructions you are giving to an AI, and that AI may have access to your files and your data and your tools. So treat any skill from an unknown source the way you treat any software from an unknown source. If you didn't write it and you don't know who did, review it before you install it. Second, if you're using Claude through your company's enterprise account, you may have restrictions on which skills you can install or create, or if you can do it at all. That's your IT department being cautious, and fair enough. Those restrictions are likely to loosen as organizations get more comfortable with this. But if there's one thing to take away from this is don't wait for the perfect skill idea. Start by just noticing what you repeat. If there's a format you always follow, instructions you keep re-explaining to AI, the way you want things written or structured, that's a skill. And whether you end up building those skills in Claude or in some other tool 6 months from now, start thinking today about how you can formalize your own expertise, because that transfers everywhere. See you next time.